I'm Bonnie Bay. Welcome to the Contrary, a weekly discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. We will get to the women's vote later in the show, but up first, we talk about the impact of COVID-19 on women and children. The pandemic is increasing the challenges many American working mothers face, threatening to reverse the gains women have made over the past few decades in the workplace. A report this week from McKinsey and Lean In found 1 in 4 women considering downsizing or leaving the workforce. In fact, 4 times as many women as men left the workforce in August and September. It also found senior level women 1.5 times more likely than senior men to consider downshifting or dropping out due to increased duties at home. 3 of 4 women said they're suffering from burnout. Joining me now to discuss COVID's impact on women and children are Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton from the District of Columbia, Tara Setmayer of the Lincoln Project and a CNN commentator, Ann Stone, Republican commentator and strategist, and Erin Matson, Democratic strategist. Welcome, everybody. How are you?
Good to be with you.
Terrific. What is happening with COVID? Is it setting women back in terms of advancement in the workplace?
I'm afraid so, Bonnie. This pandemic is having a disastrous effect on women and on the progress we've made in the last 20 years. A quarter of women are falling out of the workforce. Their duties at home and their employment, the kinds of employment they do is having a disproportionately negative effect on women, their duties in the household, particularly since we have not ironed out the disparities between men and women, is having an extraordinary effect with children like my own grandchildren having to stay at home to be educated. So who do you think is taking care of these children? We may be back a quarter of a century.
The study showed that 4 times as many women are out of the workforce due to COVID as men, and that trend kept up in August and September labor data. But we're talking about women who have jobs like waitresses and work at nail salons or hair salons, and who work as truck dispatchers, or we're not talking mainly about senior executive women. So,
but we are
tell me
talking
about the impact on them.
We're talking about them too, according to the statistics. Almost 2% of them are thinking of downsizing. I was amazed at that. You could understand the lower level women, but the fact that it is having an effect across the female labor force is of real concern.
Well, Bonnie, not only are women who are in the service industry hit because their service industries are shut down, but they also, if their kids aren't in school, they can't afford childcare. So they've got to stay home. So until the kids are all back in school, they're going to have to do this. In terms of the upper level, some are choosing. Yes, some are making the choice that they like this working from home. And I think you'll see them transition, starting their own firms and starting other businesses that are more home-based, or you're going to see businesses recruit them with the caveat and with the benefit of being able to telework.
That's not the sense of doom that I'm hearing on the playground at all with other mothers of young children where you just see, I can't tell you how many group texts I've been on, mothers who are crying at their wits' end. I can speak from personal experience as the mother of a second grader who's in all virtual learning, and managing that and the online connections and the difficulty learning for that age group, as well as doing my own work just a couple feet away, which I've been doing since March 13th, 2020. It is truly a third shift, not a second shift, a third shift. And I would estimate that it adds an additional 12 to 20 hours per week to my plate in order
but
to.
Erin,
yeah.
Your husband isn't helping you? You're
Yeah.
not splitting this with him?
You know what? We are 100% a team, and this is a feminist marriage, and I run in feminist circles, and it's time to have an honest conversation about the fact that women are still picking up the slack in this, even in my feminist circles. And there's a very simple reason for this, Bonnie. It's because we're in the middle of a true depression, and men are paid more than women.
All right. And your thoughts, Tara?
It's a direct byproduct of the president's failure to get COVID under control. We are 9 months into this thing, and we shouldn't be at the point that we're at. Given the types of jobs, as Eleanor was referring to earlier, that women hold, yes, those industries are disproportionately impacted. I mean, the labor participation rate for women is at a 32-year low. And yes, we can multitask, but we can't be in two places at once. And having the choice between kids out of school, childcare, the jobs, there's been no economic relief since the summer with Congress, no movement there. And, it's difficult when even if you have a husband at home to help you out, it's difficult to do these things because even their jobs, not everyone has a white collar job where they can split the duties at home with children. So, yeah, it's a real shame that this is what's going on here. And also, we can't deny the fact that we are at record highs as far as infections are concerned, and deaths are returning. 43 with their COVID infections, and this impacts women too.
Some are saying the recommendation is for companies to foot the bill, so to speak, and make additional efforts to recruit more women. But the companies are folding. Jobs are going out of existence right now. How realistic a solution is that, Erin?
Bonnie, yeah, this is not on individual companies, which of course bosses should be responsible for being accommodating, and there should be good workforce policies. But this is exactly what Tara said. This is a failure of leadership at the top. It is because I live in Arlington County, Virginia. It is because of super spreader events at the White House that our schools are not opening in our county. So what we really need are things like mask mandates. We need to close down bars. When we do not close down bars, what we are choosing is to keep schools closed. And so I think we need to keep the focus where it belongs. This is a public leadership vacuum, and what we need is leadership from the top to turn around this pandemic so that schools can reopen.
Well, that's what we're already seeing. We're already seeing a change in leadership at the top. You see the new president-elect calling for mask wearing, but not saying it must happen. Instead of, by example, not wearing a mask, just seeing the president wear a mask, calling for it from the top, will begin to bring down this COVID right at the moment when COVID is destined to go up according to all of the experts. In fact, we see it right now as I speak.
Well, what
going to solve this?
What can the Biden administration do when it takes over in January, besides encourage companies to rehire women more quickly than men?
Well, they can put forward legislation and start with economic relief first of all. I mean, I think it's a tragedy that the Congress has abdicated their responsibilities at this point, not helping people. I mean, I'm a small C conservative and usually don't like the big government programs, but this is an extraordinary circumstance here that was exacerbated by a president who knew it would be devastating and chose not to do anything and to ignore science and health data. So one of the the first things that the Biden administration will do, and they've already begun to do this, is listen to the healthcare policy experts, listen to the scientists. The Biden administration can begin proposing legislation, having it in front of Congress, and force them to do something to help the American people to alleviate this economic disaster.
Well, force them, maybe for the House will go
to have the discussion,
obviously, because it'll be in Democratic control. But what about the Senate? If they're lucky and they win the 2 Georgia seats, which is highly unlikely that they'll win both, or really probably either at this point.
You know what, though, Bonnie, with no president tweet at them and threaten these senators, their own constituents need help and they know it. And the reason why they haven't moved forward is because they were afraid of Donald Trump. He'll be out of office. So I think those senators will be a lot more likely to strike a compromise to help their constituents.
Trump was the one pushing for the package, Tara. The Republicans.
No, he wasn't.
Didn't. Yes, the Republican senators didn't want that big a package. They wanted the spending reined in, and they didn't want to bail out the New York City and Los Angeles. They were
playing politics with blue versus red states instead of the American people, what was important. And if Donald Trump wanted it passed, they would have gotten it passed.
Just a few of the states that were bankrupt, and he didn't control the Senate. Mitch McConnell was very independent.
Please talk to me about what you think the Senate is likely to do moving forward. Let's not rehash the past negotiations, but Mitch McConnell's still going to be, we assume, majority leader, and he just doesn't want to work with Democrats, period.
Well, what McConnell was doing was holding on to his seats who were in danger. Now that they've been won, I expect him to be more open to sensible solutions. For example, he has already said that he thinks state and local will need some funds, particularly now that all forecasts are that the virus is going to explode.
Okay, now I want to move on to the next topic, which is the women's vote. As analysts examine exit polls, we are now learning that the 2020 election did not produce the largest gender gap of any presidential election, as earlier polling had suggested. Vice President Biden's lead among women actually appeared to be similar to 2016, when Hillary Clinton won women by 13 points. All right, Tara Setmayer, as head of the, as a founding member of the Lincoln Project, you've watched this very closely. How come more Republican women didn't vote Democrat this time? It turns out that Joe Biden didn't get more women's votes, and that means because he got the vast majority of women's of color's votes, but he did not get white women's votes any better than Hillary Clinton did 4 years earlier.
Well, I'm not completely convinced that that's the case, because exit polling this time around is spotty at best. You have to remember all of the millions of early votes that were cast that would not be counted in exit polling. And all indications are that where Joe Biden did the best with women was in suburban areas outside of Dallas, Charlotte, Philadelphia, Maricopa County, Arizona, Milwaukee, places like that, Detroit, suburbs. So I'm not quite convinced yet that that Donald Trump's numbers are as high as they are when it comes to the exit polling with women. However,
we all agree, and the data found that more Democrats. You're right in saying that they can't exit poll early voters, but it's more likely, clearly, that people voting Democratic vote early or mail-in ballots. So you would think that the exit polls would oversample Republican women, which is just the people that Biden needed to draw to do better with white women overall.
But not the Republican women that decided that they were not voting for Donald Trump. Those people would have voted early because they were paying attention to the COVID restrictions. They were, galvanized enough to get their vote in early or go early vote, like myself as a conservative that voted for Biden and went in early voting. I didn't vote on election day. So we'll see. But let's just say for the course of the conversation that there was an increase, or it was over 50% again for white women, which is incredibly disappointing, I have to admit, given given the way this president has behaved. But it goes to show you that the level of negative partisanship, the level of economic anxiety, and race plays a large role in voting behavior.
What can the Democratic Party do, if anything, to get more white women, particularly white suburban, white married women, to vote Democratic? Is there anything they can do without losing other important parts of the base?
It looks like white women kind of stayed their course. The course has been that for, 25 years, women generally have tended to vote by a small margin more Democratic than men. And that was the case this year. But people vote not on women's issues, they vote on the same issues that their husbands and boyfriends vote on. So what is really amazing to me is that you see so much similarity on the core issues between men and women. Although, for example, if you look at issues like climate change, women would tend to be more sensitive to climate change than men. Well, why doesn't that show up in the polls? It's a huge disappointment for me. We need to dig deeper to find out what we need to do.
I can remember during Reagan's campaign explaining to the media that there wasn't going to be this huge gender gap. And they kept saying, how can you say that? Because women come back to security and they see Reagan as being safer. With Trump, the support of the police, I think, was very important to bring a lot of the women back. They saw him as being somebody who was standing up for what they saw as law and order. And there were other issues in terms of jobs for their kids. They still perceived that Trump would be better at creating jobs going forward. They saw the jobs being created. They saw what he'd done before, and they see that for themselves and their kids especially. So that's really what brought him back. But for 40 years, we've been looking at the gender gap that was going to be the gender gap of all gender gaps, and it almost always disappears.
All right, and last question, or we're getting close to it anyway. Tara, do you think Joe Biden will be able to bring the country back together?
I think if there's anyone that can do it, it would be Joe Biden. He's uniquely positioned to do this. Given his experience, it really humbles someone and reveals their heart when they've been through their own personal tragedy. The way that Joe Biden has throughout his whole life and the resilience that he has exhibited through it all will serve him very well as the next president of the United States. And I think that a lot of people were looking for someone that was experienced, that was competent, and compassionate enough to be the leader of America and of the free world, to restore respectability and honor and decency back to the White House and be that shining city on the hill again. You know, we heard our overseas allies say America is back and breathe a sigh of relief. And I think that's for a good reason. So if anyone can do it, it will be Joe Biden, but it will be a very difficult task considering 71 million people decided to vote for another 4 years of Donald Trump, which is a different examination, I think, that we need to have as the soul of our nation. And people need to take a look in the mirror and ask themselves why it was that they wanted another 4 years of sociopathy.
Do you think the Republicans will reform after Trump leaves office, or is he going to keep on parading around and inciting, you know, the skinheads and the I would say the old Confederates, if you will, who are still in our population? Is he going to do that and make it impossible for the Republican Party to move back, if you would say, further left, although not very far left as they were before he came along?
Yeah, well, I think the issue is it's on Republicans to decide whether or not they want to continue to be the party that openly embraces white supremacist views and and tolerates Nazis and does all of those horrible things that just happened as they were supporting somebody who wanted to be the dictator of the United States. That's on them. I'll be honest, I'm not optimistic based on a long history of the Republican Party supporting policies that really do hurt people of color. But I do think that they do have a choice to make if they want to break from that horrible period that we've just had over these last 4 years. And I sure hope they do so.
You just heard from Erin and from Dara are exactly why this country will not be united. When you see reports of Democrats putting together lists of Trump people that will be punished and all that, they don't believe in unity and healing. They believe in total domination. And if President Trump was such a dictator, he would have taken dictatorial powers because COVID could have given it to him, and he didn't. He stayed with the Federalist model, and he got attacked for it. He didn't take it.
He tried it and tried it every way to become
Yeah,
a dictator,
exactly.
but there are so many. There are so many ways to stop that from happening that he wasn't able to do it. But the point I wanted to make, Bonnie, is that like it or not, Joe Biden is a moderate. If anybody has any chance, and it is a very slight chance, very polarized country, of getting people together, it is a moderate Democrat. Many Democrats did not want a moderate Democrat, but they of course embraced him. Of course, we have elected the right Democrat for this polarized time in our country.
But Andy, let me ask you, because you are a close ally of President Trump and have worked with him for many years before he got into office, is he going to continue to, some would say, act out and try to enrage the right and get people upset and keep the country divided after he leaves office, if he leaves office on January 21st, or if he has to be dragged out by federal marshals?
See, Bonnie, again, that is the kind of language that does not unite the country, and it really pisses off the people that support him. And you guys have got to stop it if you want to be unified. And I have to say this, if the election is certified in Biden's favor, he will leave, but will he go quietly? He won't go quietly into the night. No, he's still going to be probably the preeminent fundraiser for the party, and he's still going to be a very popular figure within the party. Ronna McDaniel even said that. She doesn't expect, no matter what the outcome is, if it's Biden or Trump, that we're going to disassociate from Trump. He diversified the Republican Party. We are now the working man's party. He diversified the vote. You guys are now the party of the rich and the privileged and the left coast elites and right coast elites, the coastal elites, I guess. And we are now the party of the workers. We brought more blacks and Hispanics, obviously not a majority, but he tripled his black support. He doubled his Hispanic support, and that will continue. He's very popular with a lot of those communities, and that will continue.
I'm sorry, but one really quickly, as someone who recently left the Republican Party after 27 years of working for Republicans and dedicating my entire adult political life to that, because I'm so disgusted with how Republicans have abdicated their oaths of office and have sat back and allowed this president to become, well, now former president, to completely destroy all of the basic traditions of Republicans of not accepting the election results, of indecency, of lying, of cozying up to dictators, and his level of insults against everyone, every ethnic group. And you're going to sit there and lecture us about being indecent and about not unifying because we're calling it straight. I think that's laughable. And that's part of the hypocrisy here and part of what the problem, why we're so tribal here.
In Congress in the 80s, when I covered the House, Tip O'Neill and Bob Michael, Republican of Illinois, he was the minority leader, would argue like crazy on the floor, and after the vote, they'd go out and slap each other on the back and go do a few rounds of golf at the Congressional Country Club together. Will we ever see that again?
Bonnie, I believe that is possible. It's going to require people acting like adults. But as we've been getting a lecture on unity from someone who I honestly believe is trying to throw bombs right now, I want to acknowledge Tara, who is a dedicated conservative, and the way we have been agreeing repeatedly on this show as we're being told that we will not unify. And here we are unifying. At this point, if she said she was running for office, I'd text her a little money after the show, okay? And I'm
One
someone
day.
who doesn't of the Democratic Party. So I do believe there's hope.
She doesn't represent the mainstay of the Republican Party. Sorry.
Yeah, because there's more
right.
QAnon conspiracy theorists than there are sane conservatives like myself, which is why I left the party.
Well, what would you go back if the Trump influence were thrown out of the party?
I mean, I would reconsider, but I think that's going to be years down the road. Trumpism is fully ensconced. It wasn't repudiated. And until it is completely rooted out, I have no interest in being part of a party that is this illiberal, against democratic norms, institutions, and ideals. And that seems to think that authoritarian light is an okay way to go. That is not a party I have any interest in being a part of.
Okay, and last word.
Well, again, the language we heard today and the language we're hearing out from elected Democrats and Democrat strategists is not one of healing and hope. You hear Biden say one thing,
Trump
and
either.
Trump is trashing. So from that standpoint, until everybody's on the same page, there's no chance of healing. I don't see it happening with Biden. People feel he was dishonest, and that the press covered for a lot of his dishonesty. We'll see. There's always hope, I guess.
I think she meant Trump.
Thanks to all of you. That's it for this edition. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please visit our PBS website, tothecontrary.org. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary. Be more. PBS.